Dean Stevenson, how are you, sir?
Good.
Good, good. Thank you for coming out today. You are on the Idaho Water Resource Board. You're one of 8 directly appointed members by Governor Little. You also are chairman of a specific groundwater district. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You're a farmer. You've been in this a long time. You've been at this game. The last 6 months, though, have been quite entertaining from afar, considering I'm not a farmer, watching the insanity around what's going on with the water. Like this has become a real big thing. People nationally were all of a sudden concerned with the water and specifically groundwater farmers in the state of Idaho. You have worked out, it appears that the state is nearing the completion of a deal that is a compromise, increasing reservoirs, increasing storage, increasing, efficiency. Talk to me about the compromise that we're approaching with the water in Idaho.
Okay. We had an agreement in a 2016 agreement, and for various reasons, in the last 2 years, that agreement kind of came apart. And, for some reasons, both sides, on the deal, and the state was involved in that also. But we come to the point that agreement wasn't working, and so we needed to have something going forward because there was what they call a methodology order out there that we were facing. And so, Lieutenant Governor Bedke and Jeff Raybold from the Idaho Water Resource Board were facilitators, and we got through some of the bumps in June, and we started working on an agreement. And we met multiple times a month, and last time we met was the middle of October, and I think we hammered out the agreement. It has some of the same things as the old agreement. We have pumping reductions on the groundwater side. We also have water available for the surface water users when they come in times of shortage. And so some of the things in there, we're working on a 4-year block of time that we're going to work on it. And then we'll go forward with that from there, renewable blocks to go forward. And so we've put finally, I think the last groundwater districts are going to vote tomorrow to approve it. I think the surface water users will approve it after that. But I think we're on a path going forward that we've made some improvements in the old agreement. I think it's a lot more workable going forward.
That's great to hear. I mean, obviously, the chaos that ensued, and again, I shouldn't have portrayed it as entertaining, but the chaos that was going on around this conversation in the spring and summer, it was like, wow, man, something crazy is happening. I mean, you couldn't turn on your phone without seeing shots of farmers, walking around dusty fields and stuff. Walk me back, though. You've been at farming a long time. You've been engaged in water a long time. It seems like a difficult system to have where you say, okay, look, the surface water canal companies and whatnot, those are the senior water rights, and the junior ones are the ones pumping from underground, but you can't see how much is underground. We have some indicators, right? Like streams coming out and whatnot, but it seems like a difficult system in that they're essentially pumping from an invisible reserve that somehow is related to the surface water, right? But that's the system that we had set up. Like, when did we start getting conflicts with these things?
So there's been some conflicts, back, people have envisioned some of this. The Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer, all of that aquifer was not there, in the early 1900s. If you see, there's a bar, and I should have brought one, I guess, a graph of the historic, because of incidental recharge, meaning canal companies that leaked into the aquifer. We built the aquifer up to a very high level in the 50s and early 60s, probably its peak. A lot more than there's there now. It was artificially put there. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, starting in the 50s, groundwater development happened. I mean, even Idaho Power back then was encouraging pumpers to use the power, that they had more power than they knew what to do with. And so, as we went through time, the aquifer, the springs job is to drain the aquifer to a level. And so the spring levels were very high in the 50s, and as pumping kept being developed, the aquifers come down to a different level. But one of the problems is until the 90s, they were not conjunctively managed, meaning the surface water and groundwater were looked at two different pots. And whatever happened, if you're a pumper, hey, great. If the water goes down, I'll deepen my well. If you're a surface water guy, hey, guess what? The reach gains are going down. Guess that's my problem. But in 1994, was a court case. Well, I don't remember it was 94. It was in the 90s. It was a court case called Musser, the Musser case. And what that said, the Supreme Court come in and said, look, Musser was a farmer down in the Hagerman Valley that was taking water out of the canyon wall off Billingsley Creek. And the court said, these are together. We've got to start managing conjunctively. And that started off the whole conjunctive management issue.
Before they were conjunctively managed, if you were so you had I would assume that the groundwater, the pump farmers had their own set of senior and junior water rights. Is that accurate? So
that's accurate.
Like if I built my well in the 40s and you built your well in the 60s, then I had senior water rights too. So we just argued with each other. I would deepen my well, or you would have to stop pumping when I ran out. So there was some measurement or system of seniority within that system, but it didn't bleed over into the surface water at all.
No, and there really hadn't been much. There was a couple of cases, I think in the 60s that were groundwater on groundwater, but for the most part on the ESPA, the water was there and people pumped. In fact, groundwater districts didn't even exist at the time. I mean, everybody was just on their own, doing their own thing. But time came along, and probably for the benefit of all of us, we're having to look at conjunctive management.
So once in the 90s, whenever that case was, once we started tethering together senior and junior water rights as they relate to the pump farmers and the surface canal farmers, wasn't it essentially that like every single pump farmer is junior to the surface water? Like you just like a big old slap, like you're not, you essentially have lesser rights, and people had built their farms around a separated water system, right? So if I built a farm in the 70s and I had a pump, I had a certain amount of, not scarcity, consistency. Yeah. And I knew, I'm like, okay, I have this water. I just got to make sure Bill over there doesn't pump more than I do, or I got to go down. I could predict where I was going. Right.
Before that, into the 80s, from the time it was developed, priority didn't really mean a lot. Now, obviously now it does.
So once the 90s happened, what led to 2016? Because obviously you start gauging these things as they relate to each other. That's a really difficult thing, and now we don't have the same kind of consistency. From a farmer standpoint. He's like, oh no, I thought I would have plenty of water forever. I built this farm. I've invested millions and millions of dollars, and now I find out that I may have some degree of water scarcity that wasn't there before.
So the first cases that came forward with the pumpers were with fish farms down in Hagerman.
Oh.
Idaho is the #1 producer of trout in the United States, and in the Hagerman Reach, and as I recall, the reach down there, it's the Milner to Bliss basically area. A lot of the springs, if you've ever been in the Hagerman Valley or the Thousand Springs area, you should go visit. But it's amazing the amount of water comes out of it. I think about 70% of the outflows of the aquifer are in that reach of the aquifer. So the water's put in all other places, and a lot of it comes out down there, and so. That was the first place things kind of came to a head, and we went through court cases with fish farms. And
what was going on with the fish farms?
They were short of water because the spring flows were going down because two reasons. One of them, that we were in an artificially elevated, level to start with, and second, impacts of pumping. I mean, if you're a pumper, pumping does have impacts.
Gotcha.
And so. The impacts of both of those. So, we went down and we went to court cases, and we won some and lost some. And at the end of the day, we solved it by buying out the #2 producer of trout and then making a deal to lease facilities out to the other producers. And we bought some subordinations also. So that one was solved with, basically buying somebody out and providing water to others. So
when you're talking about an artificially high to begin with, so it's in the 50s and 60s and 70s when the canal water is going through, charging up the aquifer to an.
Well, actually, it starts in the early 1900s. Actually, starts in the 1800s in the Upper Valley. In the early 1900s in the Lower Valley, what we call, like Northside Canal and some of the others, the big canals. Yeah, they run tremendous amounts of water into the aquifer and put an artificial, that level was an artificial level to start with.
Gotcha. So just by the nature of the canals and the way that they incidentally recharge the aquifer, because they leak down, it's not like a pipe, it's literally just leaky ground.
Yep.
So they recharge the aquifer, and then subordinate industries, not farming, are developed off of that incidental recharge, like the trout farms. So all of a sudden, the trout farms develop because like, look at all this water we have coming out of these springs. We can grow all of these fish, and they're like, great, let's start doing that. Pump farmers come on, they start pumping. The fish farmers start getting less water coming out of the springs, and then the 90s when they're put together, and then we have senior and junior water rights tied together.
And the truth is, the fish industry developed roughly the same time as pumping. So not all of the it's not like the Surface Water Coalition where all their rights are senior to the pumpers. A lot of the fish farms, they had junior rights also. Some ones they could call on, ones they couldn't. So
gotcha. So riddle me this: how do you flush out? Okay, if you have senior and junior pump farmers, all right. So I've been here since 38, and you've been here since 76 or something, right? But we affect the fish farmer the exact same way, right? So like, who do you blame for this problem? Like, how does that work? Because it would seem to me it's really hard to figure out who's taking the water that should be going to the fish farmer who's on the surface, right? If you have junior and so, like, how does that flush out?
Well, it's a very difficult. There's a couple of issues with it. One of them is, you can't. It's difficult to curtail somebody and make it come out this certain spring in the.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It's like, who do you like? This spring dries up, or this spring delivers less water. Who do you stop from pumping specifically to affect that thing?
It's very difficult. And what the state come in and said, we'll shut off everybody this side of the Great Rift that's junior to whatever priority date they were. At one point it was a 75, and it's been down into the 60s. Gotcha. As these priority dates, and those were dates that, and that took out, over half of the groundwater. And so one of the interesting issues now with the consolidation of the farms, to survive in agriculture, you have to get bigger. And one of the reasons we've been successful in groundwater districts is because the same people, for the most part, the senior water right holders also hold junior water rights. I hold water rights that are, on my farm, in our family's ground there, that is some of the most senior water rights on the plain, March of 1948. And I also have some that are trust water rights. So there's stuff that's in the 80s. So, most of us have a suite of everything. And that's why we say, let's look for solutions instead of just cut off the junior.
So 2016 aims to address this problem. What happens in 2016?
So we had been going along, and we'd been providing water to the Surface Water Coalition, and the courts come in and said, the way we've done it is not going to work anymore. We'd looked at it one time a year, and then whatever happened after that happened. We had to provide some water. We knew all along in IGWA that we'd get a year we couldn't find that. So the court made some changes, and the department told the department to go back and make some changes. When I say department, I mean Department of Water Resources.
Sure.
So the director come in and made some changes that we look at multiple times during the year. It became clear in 15 when this happened. We'd start out on a good year. It looked pretty good. Then it's turned off dry. And it became pretty clear that we were not going to be able to fulfill our obligation as IGWA. So, we engaged with the help again of Lieutenant Governor Bedke. At the time, he was a speaker. But and some other legislators also, we came in and started working on the 16 agreement, and in that 16 agreement, we agreed to reduce our pumping about 12% off a little over 12% off historic levels, and we agreed to provide them 50,000 acre feet of water every year.
Gotcha.
And with that also, we agreed that to take the aquifer up a little level, that it would come up. We set some benchmarks that the aquifer would go up, but we were not able to make, that was based off an older version of the groundwater model, and we were not able to make that work. But
gotcha. And getting the aquifer to come back up itself is a task, right? Because you have to have recharge sites. So you have the incidental recharge, you have intentional like gravel pit recharge,
right?
Then you have an injection recharge. Like you have all of these different ways to store. But it takes, first off, you need an excess of water, right? You need to divert the water.
And we do have that. We have excess of water at times. It just this last year, water flowed past Milner. We have times of excess, water, and the truth is, we're not going to build. I think it's going to be difficult to build any new reservoirs in the Upper Snake, or even in in Idaho, it's going to be difficult. And so I think the place we need to look to store water is the aquifer.
Okay. Break this down for me. So we had a reservoir failure in the 70s
Right.
at
Teton.
Teton. Right. So that fills up, and pretty soon thereafter it fails, floods hundreds of thousands of acres, ruin lives.
Yes.
And after that, people are like, hey, man, this is not the business. Like, let's get out of the reservoir business. But that was back in the 70s. Like, we had the Pinto in the 70s, right? Like, we have better technology, better rebar, I hope better cement, better all kinds of things. What's the downside of working to make another reservoir?
So the good we could look at the Teton again, and I don't think it's, number one, we're going to have the Bureau of Reclamation involved with the cost of those. Teton was a difficult reservoir to fill to begin with because it's not a huge drainage. And another thing to remember is, when you start filling reservoirs have priority dates also.
Oh.
So Teton wouldn't get fill until American Falls gets full, or, Island Park gets full, or, name the reservoir. So you would have a different priority date. So it's not like building, a new dam, and because it's higher in the system, may be harder to fill. But I don't know that that's the bigger issue right now. I think, there's a large population area below that. There's about probably 3 or 4 times as many people living below that dam as there used to be.
Oh, sure.
And
I
think,
man, I would not, I'm not saying like, if I lived in that area, I'd be like, no to Teton Dam. I'm just saying.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be difficult. I mean, I think number one, you'd have to get the Bureau of Reclamation involved and get them. And I'm not sure. I'm not saying it can't happen, and I wouldn't support if it could happen, but I just not think I think that's a tougher deal. I think if we're looking in the near term, I think we need to look at storing more water in the aquifer.
Okay. So the aquifer, if you're doing just a normal 40-acre gravel recharge area, you can get something like 10,000 acre feet of water into that thing over the season. Is that accurate?
You could, depending on how big it is and how long you run. Oh yeah, you can get the 2 biggest sites in the state are in the lower valley off the Milner-Gooding Canal. And if you're ever over there sometime, and when they're running, I mean, they're quite impressive. Milepost 31 and Milepost 28, they can take, each one of those sites will take probably around 800 acre feet a day.
Wait, so is it literally just like water's flowing in and then like a big
well, there's places that is. So
wow.
Yeah, that's in the lower valley, and it's impressive when they're running. Now, the upper valley, we don't have those sites. We're working on developing. We're reliant more upon injection wells and gravel. Okay. That's because they don't have a really big canal that goes through all the basalt lava like we have at Milepost 31. But
gotcha. Now, how many of those? Because we lost or didn't lose, but we had to let go of over half a million acre feet of water just because we didn't have the capacity to store it at the time. So, like, how many more of those recharge sites for the aquifer would we have to develop in the near term to actually start putting back into the aquifer?
We've got more we've got to develop. So the state water plan, and this kind of goes some back to our new agreement, but the state water plan had a number in it of 250,000 acre feet average. I think we're right at 250 on an average right now with the Water Resource Board recharge. But part of our agreement is we're going to move forward, including the state, and we're going to try to move that up to 350,000 acre feet a year, another 100,000 acre feet on an average on a year. So what it tells you, though, there's some years we have no recharge available.
Gotcha.
And so you have to have a lot of sites. When the big water comes, we have to be in a position to take it.
And that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, if you have another year where you're like, hey, great winter, this is banging, we should all be taken care of. Like, how do we grab that 500,000 as it's flowing by? Do we have can we divert it, or is there, or is it like, no, we're 4 years away from being able to grab that really efficiently?
We can't do it immediately. We have to do it as we go along. I mean, number one, we develop these gravel sites up there, and they're good sites, but we also have to test them, see what they take, make sure they'll take it. We have to do groundwater monitoring because the first thing, the last thing we want to do is upset the neighbors and contaminate the aquifer. So we have to be careful. We have a monitoring program with that, and our feeling is we're going to take it, we're going to take it slow and safe and do it as we go. But I mean, we're going as fast as we can, but we also have to do it right.
Gotcha. And the contamination comes from just the nature of the aquifer and the materials that it's made of is a very effective, high quality filtration system. It's not, perfect, but as the water is pulled by gravity down through, lava and sand and gravel, all this stuff, it gets filtered out pretty well. So that by the time it either comes out of the spring and goes back onto the surface, it's filtered, or by the time it gets to one of the pump straws and you guys pump it out, then it's gone through this large filtration process.
Yeah, and even if you use injection wells, and that's what we're looking at right now, is some injection wells, and they've been used in other areas and can be very effective. You got to remember, this is a fractured basalt aquifer, so it doesn't have to move very far, and it gets filtered just by the fractured basalt. It's not like there's a giant pipe down there.
Gotcha.
It's filtered through, it's got to travel through gravel, fractured basalt to get to itself also. So it's.
And are the injection recharge sites, are they like a giant bathtub that you just fill up and then there's a pump at the bottom going just hammering it straight down?
No, they're just like a straw put into the aquifer, and it's like it's a well that's drilled, and it goes down into the aquifer, and they run down with gravity. They're gravity down.
Oh, you don't actually have like a giant 3,000 horsepower pump or something.
No.
Oh, that's awesome. So it's literally just a funnel that's like just a straight shot all the way down and then disperses as. Oh.
And we have, like I've said, the water board, we have to be careful. We have to have a monitoring plan that's approved by DEQ, and we have to, I've told folks we're going to have to do this right. Let's take it slow and easy. Let's watch our water quality. Let's see how, we've done, injection wells have been done for years. And so we know they can be done safely. And so, but the public, we have to make sure we have buy-on with the public in those areas. So if I wanted to find out information about the soil in my area or my neighborhood, what does the DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, do they have that information? I don't know if they do. You're talking about for availability to do recharge or whatever?
Or just anything. One question that people have been saying is that people are very worked up about cloud seeding.
Yeah.
Or some people are, and they're very concerned. I mean, other states use different things, or there's sentiment that it's like, oh, they're using like aluminum, or they're using bronzium, or it's like, no. Idaho Power and Idaho in general uses silver iodide. Yeah. They're not using aluminum. They're not using all these other things. And I keep coming back to the idea. It's like, okay, hang on a sec. If you're worried about the thing that's coming out of the flares on the plane, we can just test for that thing. Like, let's grab some soil. If you're worried about silver iodide buildup, let's grab some soil and go test it for silver iodide. Like, this is not that complex.
So these levels that we put out in cloud seeding are very low. And I'm not the expert on cloud seeding, but I've had some.
Well, I'm definitely not the expert, but
they are extremely low. Background levels are far, far higher than anything we're putting out of a plane. I mean, these planes are going up, and I don't know how many pounds they're putting out, but they're putting them out over hundreds of thousands of acres.
Right.
In pounds over hundreds of thousands of acres. So yeah, it's a small amount. I'm not concerned about the background levels of the sodium or the
silver iodide.
Silver iodide.
I said sodium. Now we're both at sodium.
Yes, silver iodide.
But like, if people wanted to find out about that, like, where could they go to check it out? Because again, I know some people have said, like, there are so many collaborations with so many different agencies. I can never keep the acronyms right and everything. But like, is there a centralized agency?
I don't know. The forest. I mean, most of the cloud seeding is done on Forest Service lands. I'm not sure. EPA might have that number. I don't know. I mean, there's background numbers of most soil's made up of minerals. And so you're going to have a background level of something, of everything in most soils. So
right, yeah. The amount of I remember seeing there was that crummy TV show Shark Tank.
Yeah,
there was a guy who came on Shark Tank, and he had this invention idea that was essentially a man-made tornado or hurricane or something within a containment area of the ocean. And he was saying that the ocean has sufficient levels of gold in it that you could separate out the salt water and everything else and have a collection of gold. They're like, that's going to cost too much, man. But he was really intent on it. And he's like, look, bottom line is there's gold and there are other things in the ocean that we can just suck out. And if we separate them correctly, we'll be able to harvest that stuff. And again, same thing with average soil, not generally the amount that would make anybody go start panning for gold, obviously, but it exists in the soil naturally.
Our soils are, most of them in eastern Idaho where I'm at, I mean, they're wind deposited soils, they're volcanic soils. The volcanoes come up from from the mantle of the earth or wherever, and they carry the same minerals up that concentrate that people mine. So I mean, you're going to find, I don't know where you'd find the numbers, but I know like most of the soils, I mean, they'll have a little bit of everything in them.
Yeah. I'm worried about cloud seeding in general. I'm actually not worried about it at all. Like from a silver standpoint. Like when we moved here, my house is built on an old farm, right?
Yeah.
Or old, ranch, whatever it is. And we were able to test the soil and find out, okay, how much of, are there pesticides, are there herbicides, are there other chemicals in here that are less desirable? And I do believe that that's a problem. I have a friend who has a certain type of cancer, and she grew up on a house that was prior to the development, there was some manner of refinery there. Mm-hmm. And there were really high levels of like petroleum products and other stuff. And it's really not good. Yeah. They didn't know it at the time, obviously. Because this is decades and decades ago. And then they realized later, they didn't take out enough dirt. So I was really concerned about that moving in here. It's like, okay, what's in our soil? And I mean, surprise, surprise, we had trace amounts of like cyanide and some other things that was like, no, this is in the soil here.
They call that background levels in the soils. And,
right.
And I mean, that's, for example, arsenic. A lot of wells in the West.
Excuse me. I think it was arsenic, not cyanide. Excuse me.
Arsenic through the West. I mean, background levels of arsenic in, a lot of the areas in the West. I mean, that's just some of what's there.
Right. And we got a water filter. We got like a, whole house filter. And then we also got an RO system. Yeah. So our water is really, really clean. Mm-hmm. Like I'm just not worried about it from a consumer standpoint, but I am actually starting to get worried about, I feel like the reactions towards things like this are like we saw this spring and summer. Mm-hmm. People got really worked up over the water call. And then what came out of that was a different story than what was actually going on. The story that emerged from the crisis with the water was one that the federal government was encroaching on us. They were funding these cobalt mines. Can I confirm with you there are no cobalt mines actively working on the Snake Plains aquifer?
You can confirm that.
Okay, confirmed. That is the lie. The dude, Mad Attack, whatever he was, he sent out this video and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people watched it, millions, I'm sure. And were flipped out because they thought that we were like selling out our farmers for the cobalt miners. Like there are no cobalt miners here. Like what do you, and I'm really concerned that same type of story is getting told about cloud seeding. And it seems odd to me that it's like, okay, if you know what say Idaho Power or other agencies are using to cloud seed, if you know they're using silver iodide, we should be able to go out and test it and find out if there's more. If you're worried about silver iodide, let's go find out if there's silver iodide around. Like if you're worried about silver iodide in your water, let's test your water. If you're worried about it in your soil, let's test the soil. But whenever I say that to people, it's like they blow me off. They're like, oh, well, they're not going to tell you. It's like, who's they and what's happening? Because again, if we lose cloud seeding as an acceptable practice within the state of Idaho, that's roughly like 10% of our water production annually, isn't it?
Well, no, it's less than that. It can be.
God.
It depends on the year. You can't, you can't use cloud seeding to make a bad storm good.
Sure.
You can take a good storm and make it great with cloud seeding. And, I think there's ways to do that. And I think we as the Water Resource Board need to do more as we reach out, because we do help, we run this program.
Right.
We need to do more outreach to let people know this is safe. And it is. I mean, you could probably find silver iodide numbers in the soil already, and they're probably background levels. I don't know, but they're pretty small amounts that go out in the air. But what you said is right with people. In the commodity trading business, there's a saying it's called "buy the rumor, sell the fact." Right. And people like to take the first part of that. That's like the cobalt mine in Idaho that's taking the water, and wrong drainage, folks. That's
and every time they'd say it, I'm like, what company? Tell me the location, right? And finally, somebody did produce something. He was like, they're involved in lithium production. I was like, okay, what is it? And he sends me this thing, and I go to I Google. I'm like, okay, he nailed it. There is a company that says cobalt. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the point is, it was like Idaho Cobalt Company or something. Yeah. And I go onto the website, and the first line on the website is cobalt mining has ceased for like the last several years. Like, okay, you found a cobalt mine that is no longer in operation by their own admission. I don't know what to tell you. We are not cobalt mining on the Snake Plains Aquifer.
Well, that's in the salmon drainage, so it's completely different rivers. So, so yeah, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but yeah, I think.
So how do we ward off against that? Because I'm all for being pragmatic, right? And by the way, if there's something dangerous going on, let's stop that. Like that's not a good idea. Let's stop dangerous things. But what I'm also worried about is innocuous things that we do rely on getting hampered by people's anxieties.
Oh,
how do we address that?
I don't know. Number one,
you're supposed to have the answers, Dean.
Well, so we as a water board probably have to do more outreach in the social media sphere to say, hey, we want to show this is safe. I'm an older guy. I'm not.
You're not that old, man.
I'm over 60, so I don't have a Facebook account. My wife does. I don't. I seriously, I don't.
Dean, nobody's on Facebook anymore. It's all right. It's all right.
Okay, I didn't know that. My kids are on Snapchat and Instagram. I think.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't
get them off Snapchat, bro. That's a terrible app. But Instagram's fine.
Instagram, I don't know.
TikTok. You want to do TikTok?
I have a son does TikTok videos. I don't know. I don't get involved. I don't have enough time for that.
Yeah,
right. But I think we need to get as a water board, and we're working on this, getting more outreach. Let people this is safe to do, and what we're doing. We have the, truthfully. If I didn't think, my family, I draw water out of the aquifer. I mean, I live out on the farm, and the water I drink and the water my grandkids drink comes out of the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer. I care about it,
right?
And so we don't want to do anything to mess the aquifer up or pollute it. And so, I don't know that anybody wants to do that.
That's the other thing that I keep coming back to with people. It's like, if this is so dangerous, why are the people that live here the ones engaging in it? And I'm not saying everybody that lives here engages in it, right? That's not it. But the people that are in charge of it and know the science behind it and have been educating and helping people understand studies, they're the ones that's like, no, I live right around the corner. Like, there goes the plane. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And in reality, I mean, you're dealing with like high mountain elevations during winter storms. Like, you're not going to see it.
Well, I've had people tell me on cloud seeding that you see the contrails in the air up there from a plane, that's cloud seeding. I'm like, no, it's not. I mean, cloud seeding happens during the big storms, and you're not going to see anything because they're up in the clouds.
But didn't you say that, wasn't it like Oklahoma does cloud seeding in the...
I think there's, in the Dakotas, I think there's some states that do it in the summer.
But they do it specifically because they're trying to mitigate hail the size of softballs and stuff,
or they do that, and they also try to increase the rain.
Right.
They do it at airports in some places in the winter to try to get the fog out, to precipitate the fog out into snow, and so they can keep the airports running. So I mean, this is not a brand new technology.
I know, but this is what I'm worried about, Dean. Because like, if this goes, and then the farmers, both surface and pump, are in a worse situation. Right. It's like, I had a gal from Fair, Idaho on, and really enjoy Fair, Idaho. I do a lot of shows with them, and she was saying, she was like, listen, it's some astronomical amount of our land it's like 20% of the land in Idaho is farmland, farm and ranch, right? And dude, like, if we lose, like, this is the main engine for our entire state, and if we lose that economic engine or hamper it, it's going to be really, really bad for people, and that concerns me, right?
It is going to be bad, and cloud seeding is an important part of what we're doing. It's not the whole deal. I mean,
no, of course not. Yeah, sure.
It's one of the tools we have, and we're going to have to use all the tools.
Right.
There is no silver bullet to resolve the problem we have right now. It's going to be lots of little things.
Right.
Going forward.
Yeah. It's wild times, man. But the bottom line is, we are coming to the end of this water crisis, right? Like, we don't have a universally signed agreement, but we're approaching that. Correct?
I would say that by the end of this week, we'll have a signed agreement.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. What are you guys going to focus on then once the agreement's signed? Once the crisis is over, you're going to just go back to normal life?
No, it never goes back to normal life. There's no normal anymore. No, we have the parts of the agreement we have to live up to. I mean, we have a reduction plan, a pumping reduction plan that each district has to live by, and we have to keep working on that. In our groundwater district, we're working on what's called soft conversions. That's meaning in an area when we can find, and this is another thing, when water's available, why don't we take ground and put it back on surface water and leave the wells off? That's another way to, I mean, what's just as effective as recharge is stopping pumping. And so what we have what's called soft conversions, and we've done them in a lot of the districts are looking at doing them. We've done some in and we're doing more, our district. But we're going to, we're going to build a pipeline and take water from a canal when there's water bank water available, and turn off wells and run them on surface water instead of well.
So the well farmers would have, in essence, temporarily become surface farmers.
Right.
That's a great idea. So the 600,000 that flows by, it's like, dude, pump it right over here.
Exactly.
Let's go, baby.
When the water's available, and it's not always available, but when it's available, we want to maximize. Again, like I say, it's not the silver bullet.
Sure.
But it is also, I mean, for example, the one our district's doing, we're going to be able to do recharge wells also in conjunction with the pipeline. So we'll be able to do it in the winter if water's available. We'll be able to pump to some recharge wells. In the summer when water's available, we'll just shut the pumps off and use it for irrigation. So that's a piece that some districts have done and others are looking at doing. So, take advantage of that water while it's there.
One more question, if I may. When you talk about water use reduction from the pump farmer standpoint, how is that literally just money out of your pocket? Like, or are there things that you can do, like efficiencies or different technologies you can invest in long term that improve that? Because it's like if you get 100, let's just say 100, arbitrary units of water, they're like, hey, Dean, you're going to have to go down to 90. Do you just take the hit and say, okay, well, I used to be able to do 100 units worth of farming. Now I can only do 90 units worth of farming?
So we've done, most districts have done, in Magic Valley, we had to take some reductions on what we do. We had to, reduce by about a little over 12%. And so, we tell the farmers, okay, this is how much water you have. Here's your acres. And there's an allotment my farms get an allotment based on the priority dates of my water rights. So if I have a more senior right, I get more water. If I have a junior right, I get less. And I put them all together in a suite of, all my water rights together. And this is how much water I have to pump. And that's what we have to live by. Now, the districts can offset some of that by doing private recharge. And that's part of our new agreement that we have, that we can offset some of that with recharge. Because, again, recharge can do as much for the aquifer as reducing pumping,
Gotcha.
It's just taking one side of the equation, you're adding more in instead of pumping it out. And, you look at a balance there, but no, we can do those things. And and the other thing we've done as farmers, we've figured out that we can be more efficient users of water. I know I can't raise as many high water use crops as, I'd like to at times, but there's a big rotation, if I'm raising, say I'm a malt barley is a big crop for me. Malt barley uses about half as much water as corn. So most farmers look at it and say, well, here's what I have. I have a crop that I raise. I'm a sugar beet farmer. It's a higher water use crop. Well, I can't put half the farm in sugar beets. I have to have a suite of crops to try to stay within my, and we have farmers have learned to be more efficient with the use. We, center pivots help. There's a lot of things we do that we can, and just because of the fact that we don't have it, we've said, look, let's look at how much of this do we really need? And we've been able, most of the folks in our district have been able to cut their usage and maintain, as many acres as they want to in production. Although there's people in our district that, a dairy I know of that has, they've dried some pivots up because they need to have the water for the higher water use crops. So
Gotcha.
But give the water to the farmer, let them make a choice. They can make the decision on what they want to do.
Do you feel like that's, I was going to ask, do you feel like that will ultimately make our state, change our state's economy to reflect what the availability of resources are? But I suppose that's always the way it goes with farming, right?
Right. It's always the way it goes.
Like that's just inherent in the nature of the beast, which is like, you don't have enough acres. You can't build, you can't grow these high acre need crops. You don't have enough water.
So the switch happened in our district and most of these districts. Instead of farming acres, we have to deal with the acre feet of water we have available.
Gotcha.
And then we as farmers decide, okay, what do I want to do with it?
Sure. Well, Dean, listen, I know we got a hard stop here because you got to get back for a meeting. Is there anything that we've missed? Is there anything you want to mention about the agreement or any
No,
considerations?
I think the agreement, I'd like to talk, all sides came together on this. We had some very productive meetings, to the Lieutenant Governor's wisdom. He put us together, and at times he put just the farmers together, the guys, that the board members and some managers in the room to make the negotiations, and we had some very productive times. There's times when we all got taken to the woodshed, and we probably needed to, but we've come back into a position. I think we've got a plan going forward.
That's wonderful. It's wonderful. And again, considering that ag is the real engine of the state, it's great to see that you guys are working in a pragmatic manner.
But and the truth is, in our area, in most areas, in our district, we, our family, we have water, we have ground under the surface water system and the groundwater system. We're all the same people.
Yeah.
We have ground. I was asking one of the court cases I was testifying in one of the hearings. I said, we're equal opportunity. We pay all the attorneys. In our family, we have the bulk of our farms under private wells, but we also have ground under 2 members of the Surface Water Coalition. So, we're all the same people. And I think most people realize we got to work toward a solution.
I so appreciate that about the state. I love that everyone I talk to is like, listen, man, we're working hard. Like, that's my neighbor. He's a surface water guy. I'm a groundwater guy. Like, we're not enemies. Like, yeah, look, we got to resolve some things, but like, we're all working together. Right. And even as you're pointing out, it's like, I'm on both sides, me personally, it's like, we're all trying to iron this out.
Well, in agriculture, if you want to have a viable sugar beet industry, you need to have both ground and surface water. If you want to have a potato industry, you have to have ground and surface water. If you want to have a dairy industry, you have to have, we need both of them. Like I've said, that the numbers out there, when you look at above Milner, there's about equal acres, or maybe a little more groundwater, but they're roughly equal acres of both ground and surface water.
Yeah.
And so we're all the same, we're all the same people. And if we're going to keep a vibrant ag industry, which we have, we have a great ag industry in this state, then we need to work together and try to figure out how to make it work out and still respect the laws in the state of Idaho. I'm not in support of getting rid of first in time, first and right, because, I think my senior rights on the groundwater side also have value. So, I think, but we got to figure out a way among ourselves, among the irrigators, to work it out. And I think we will.
Yeah, it's a complex problem. Dean, thank you for coming in today. I appreciate you. Obviously, I don't think water problems are going away, so hopefully you'll come back in the future and we can tackle other things. But I'm really excited to hear that there's an agreement that's going to be penned out and finished up by the end of this week. That'll be an exciting time for Idaho.
Thank you.
Yeah.